Okay, can you guys see my screen? Oh, you can answer in the chat or unmute. I just need to know if you can see it.
I'm able to.
Okay, good. Okay, then we will start. So, welcome to the second anatomy class. This week we will be going over the skeletal system, which you guys studied using the Quizlets video. I don't believe there was a video, and slideshow. So this will be kind of a debrief and review, as well as question time for that. So again, I'm Arushi. I'm the anatomy lead, and I have Ryan here. She is going to
Hi.
help me. Okay. So for today, we're going to start with a reminder again, and then any questions. We'll review the sections of the skeletal system, and then we'll do some more questions, and then we will end with a Kahoot. It's pretty much the same as last time. It's just we will go over, and if you guys have questions, you can always ask, because that's what these live classes are for. As a reminder, join Google Classroom and schedule for the Eventbrite, because that is what gets you the Zoom link if I do not send it on the Discord server that day. So we're going to do the skeletal system today, but last time, as you guys probably saw, there weren't as many questions, so it was more of a review, and we want it to be more engaging because last week's Kahoot did not go as well because I'm not sure if you guys understood the material as well, or it was confusing, or I'm not really sure what happened. But you can always ask privately to me in the chat, publicly, or unmute if you have any questions, if you want to answer anything, because we would really like way more engagement. So you can ask us to elaborate on something that we didn't really go over, or if you have a question on something that we did, or you just have a question about anything, to be honest. Or a comment or an answer to a question. Just we want more engagement, either by public or private chat or unmuting. Okay, so starting with the skeletal system, the components, we will be going over every single one of those today. But the functions are it's the structure for the human body. Like if you didn't have your bones, then you would be a noodle. You wouldn't have anything. Your body would not function. And this is a dynamic system, meaning that it changes throughout life. And this kind of makes sense because as a baby, you're not as big. You have way more bones because your bones are all separate and they haven't fused together yet. So your system is always changing. And then when you break a bone, your bone has to heal back together. So your system is always changing. And the skeletal system is made of bones, cartilage, and ligaments, which, as you recall from last week's lesson, bone and cartilage is connective tissue. And then another function of your bones, basically, is where your muscles attach. So those are the functions. So the bones of your skull there are a lot of them, much more than this image goes into, but its main purpose is to protect your brain. That's what sits in like the upper portion right above your eyes, like eye level, nose level, inside your head. So you need protection on your brain. And it also supports your face, like your lips. If you didn't have bone under, like it would just sag, right? Like there would be no, like everything would just droop. You don't want that. So your cranium has two parts, the calvarium and your cranial base. So your calvarium is the roof of your cranium, and it is what contains the like parietal, frontal, like occipital, temporal, like, can you guys see my cursor? I hope you can see my cursor.
We can.
Okay, yeah. So like kind of where I'm showing is the frontal part of of your calvarium, or it is your calvarium. Okay. And your cranial base is more like bottom portion. That kind of makes sense. Like your base is the bottom. It's what gives support. So this is what gives articulation for your first cervical vertebrae. So it's what connects the head and neck and the back of your body. And then it also is there for the many, many, many facial bones that you have, every single tiny little bone inside your head, and your mandible, with it, which is your jaw. And this makes up your facial skeleton. Okay, so now we can go more into depth of each of the bones. Would you guys like that? Because depending on how much you understood from the lesson, we can go into that or not. So put it in the chat if you would want to go into like the zygomatic, lacrimal, nasal, like all of those bones, or you would rather skip them. It really depends on how much you want explained. So you can put that in the chat now, or else I will move on. Okay, anyone else want to go in depth? You guys, we need more feedback from you. I don't know what you guys want unless you tell me.
I don't know if you can see the chat, but
yeah, okay, now
people
I
are
can.
saying that they want to go.
Yeah, I only had one, but now there are 3. Okay, so we'll go in depth. Okay, so the zygomatic bone is like, as you can see in the picture, it's really small, but it's really important. It protects your eyes, and it forms your cheekbones. So right here, it kind of goes around your eyes and your cheekbone. Your lacrimal, it's the smallest bone of your face and is part of the medial wall of your orbit, and your orbit is your eye, like the eye section. And medial, as you recall from terminology, is towards the midline. So it's for your right eye, it'd be on the left side of your right eye. And for your left eye, it would be on the right side of your left eye. So it's just the ones closer to your nose in your eye would be your lacrimal bones. And then the nasal bone forms the bridge of your nose, and it's made of the inferior nasal conchae, which is inside your nasal cavity. And it increases the surface of your surface area of your nasal cavity. And the reason for this is the more surface area you have, the more nose hairs you have, right? So that whenever you inhale something like dust or air, can filter it better. So you want more surface area for better filtration of your nasal cavity, which protects you even more. The palatine is the back of the oral cavity, and it forms a section of your hard palate. So wait, is there another slide on this? Nope. Okay, so I think there was in the main slideshow, but your palate is divided into the hard and soft palate. So the palatine is the hard one, okay, and it's further back. So your maxilla is part of your upper jaw, and your hard palate, again, just like the palatine, but it's much bigger. So as you can see, it's kind of your nose and more of your palate, I guess. And then your vomer, I think that's how you say it, your vomer, it's the rear of your nasal septum. So it's kind of like, you can't really see it, but it's like on the back of your nose, if you can imagine it like that. And then your mandible is your jaw. And this forms your temporomandibular jaw joint, which is like right here. It's your TMJ joint. So right here would be your TMJ joint. Okay, and then points of weaknesses in your skull. Unfortunately, you do have those, so it's not entirely reliable, but it's the human body. Your pterion is between your temporal, parietal, sphenoid, and frontal bones, and it's the thinnest part. So it would kind of be like, I'm not sure like where on this diagram it would be, but it would be in the front area of your face. Like somewhere around here. And then your anterior cranial fossa. So fossa is just another word for either like a depression or a hole in your skull, which is totally normal, by the way. There are many, so you can have veins traveling through and vasculature and all that stuff. So it's a depression on the frontal sphenoid and ethmoid bones. So you just need to be extra careful. Concussions obviously occur. Your middle cranial fossa is another depression. Posterior cranial fossa again. So where those are, you just need to be careful because if you get hit too hard, obviously, you can get a concussion, and that is not good. So I hope that was as in depth as you guys hoped. If you want more information, obviously just put it in the chat or unmute privately, publicly, whatever you guys want. Okay, vertebral column is pretty straightforward. There's not much to it, but it's essential to your body. It's support for your head and neck. The cervical vertebrae hold up your head, and everybody would like their head to be held up. It provides structure for your body. It runs basically throughout your body until your pelvis. So it is like essential. You would not survive without a vertebra. So this is divided into 5 sections: the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacrum. And so the cervical, you have C1 through C7. You have 7 of them. And C1 and C2 are actually structured a little differently just because they need to, C1 needs to hold up your head, so it connects a little differently than the rest of them. And then C2, since it needs to connect to C1, which is a little different, it's also shaped a little differently. But then C3 to 7 are all the same looking. The thoracic vertebra, you have 12 of them, and they all connect to ribs. So not sure if you can see it in this image, but they provide support for your thorax, which is why they're called thoracic. So pretty straightforward for that. Your lumbar, you have 5 of them, and they're much bigger because since they're at the bottom here, the red ones, they need to carry a lot of weight of your vertebral body and your body. So they are much chunkier, and they do its job because they are more structurally sound. And then you have your sacrum, which are 5 sacral bones fused together. And they're kind of down here within your pelvis. And you have your coccyx, which are 4 fused coxal bones. And then all vertebral bones have vertebral foramen, which, just like fossa, are little holes. And you need these holes in order for the spinal cord to travel up through and for your spinal nerves and vasculature and all of that. So this will be like a common thing in the axial skeleton, which is your head and vertebral column. They all have fossa or foramen. So because there's just a lot going on, because you have your central nervous system also going through these bones, so you need a lot of vasculature points and nerve like points for them to go through, because nerves just can't travel through bone. They need something to go through, like a pathway. Okay, Ryan.
Okay. So should I share my screen or is
No, you
are you
can just
keeping yours?
speak from my screen.
Okay. So from the for the bones of the thorax, there's parts of the rib cage and the ribs and then the sternum. So the sternum is made up of 3 parts. It has the manubrium, which is the top of the sternum. It's like between numbers 1 and 2 of the ribs, and it's the green. And then the middle part of the sternum is the body. and the lower part on the near the spinal cord is the xiphoid process. So for those parts, they kind of help to surround there in the back of the rib cage, and they kind of help to hold it. And then for the ribs in the rib cage, there are 3 types of ribs, and it is classified into true ribs, false ribs, and floating ribs. And the true ribs are at the top, and the false ribs are near the middle, and the floating ribs are unattached, like from the at the bottom, they're kind of unattached, not with all of them to the spinal cord. And so the ribs protect your vital organs, so your heart, your lungs, the ribs cover those and make sure they're safe in case anything comes near you. And it attaches to the spinal cord, which is also important to hold up your back and your neck. And there's 7 upper ribs at the top. They all attach to the sternum. The rib cage attaches to the sternum, which is on the spinal cord. And I have a quick question. So if you want to type it in the chat or say open your mic if you want to say it, that is fine. And it is, which rib classification is attached to the thoracic vertebrae? So you guys can type it in the chat if you want. So I see that we got one answer, and it said the true ribs. That is part of it, but it is both the true ribs and the false ribs are attached to the thoracic vertebrae. If as you can see, the highlighted yellow parts are attached to it, and the floating ribs are not attached. They are that's hence the name floating ribs, are not attached to the vertebrae. And yeah. So do you guys want me to explain anything more? Just let me know in the chat, or you can unmute your mics.
Okay, so I have something to add on. So as you can see, the costal cartilage is the yellow part. So that's actually what they attach the ribs attach to. So it's not like your rib just attaches to your sternum. It has to go through costal cartilage. And the space in between, like ribs 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, it's called your intercostal spaces. And then you're gonna have muscles and vasculature going through there. So when we get to those units, we'll go through those muscles as well. So yeah. Okay, so bones of the upper limb. You have your clavicle, scapula, humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. So basically your clavicle is your collarbone. Pretty standard. It's kind of a weird shape. It's like that curly Q kind of thing. It's a long bone that connects your sternum and shoulder together, and your scapula. So your scapula is your shoulder blade, but it's the bone of your shoulder blade. And this bone is like pretty juicy, like it's a big bone. And it's right here. So this is what connects the clavicle and your humerus. And this joint between your scapula and humerus is called your glenohumeral joint, your shoulder joint. It's a ball and socket joint. So that's also a very important joint because so the head of your humerus is actually pretty round, like it's basically a circle, but I think it's called the glenoid glenoid fossa, something like that, on your scapula, and it's basically like a little divot, but it's not deep at all. Like you would think if you have something that round, like if you look at me in my camera, if you have something that round, like, and it's fitting into something like this, like it can move a lot. Like it's not something that's like round. Like it's kind of like it's just you have a lot of motion, kind of unsafe. But that's why you have such like a big range of motion in your shoulder. So it's actually the least stable joint in your body, but it's also the most movable joint in your body, which is why you get shoulder dislocations pretty easily. Okay, so that's why you can move like your upper extremities a lot. And then your humerus is just a long bone that extends from your shoulder to your elbow. Yeah, there's nothing really complicated to it. And then it connects to your radius and ulna. And how I remember is ulna is on your pinky side, and the radius is not. I couldn't think of like a mnemonic for that, so that's all I have. So these actually form the radius, ulna, and humerus. All three of them form your elbow joint. And it's a very complicated joint, so we'll just not get into that because I'm not really sure I remember every single thing about that, but it's all three bones. And then your hand bones, which are your carpal, metacarpals, and phalanges. Your carpals are your wrist bones. Your metacarpals are kind of before your fingers start. And then your phalanges are like mostly your fingers. And then you have two sets of phalanges, your distal and proximal, which is why you have the knuckles. So your thumb actually does not have the distal set of phalanges because it's much shorter, but every other finger has both sets. Okay, bones of the upper limb. You have your hip bone, which is your pelvis. And there are three parts to your pelvis. You have, I'm not sure if I remember every single part right. I know you have your ilium, pubic symphysis, and one other part. I'm so sorry. I am forgetting this, but there are three parts to your pelvis, and they're not really separated. They're just like different sections of it, you can say. And then your acetabulum, which is like another little fossa, you can say, I guess. And that's where the femur head connects to it to form your joint for that. And it's pretty stable because, as you can see, your acetabulum is pretty deep for the round femoral head. So unlike your glenohumeral joint, this is the most stable joint in your body, ball and socket joint in your body. But you also have way less movement when you think about it. Your hips are just not as flexible as your arm, and that is why. And then your femur corresponds to your humerus. Not much to it, but it's the strongest, heaviest, and longest bone in your body, and it supports a lot of weight. Like everything above it is just supporting all of that. And then your patella is your kneecap. And this is where you have a lot of injuries, again, because it's just a very complicated joint because it has your femur, your fibula, and your tibia, just all combined, and that's like joining it. But it allows for smooth knee movement. Yeah. And then it connects the thigh and tibia muscles in the front because you don't really have a kneecap in the back. And then your tibia is the longer, thicker bone under your knee. And then it has a lot of weight. It's larger, so it can carry more weight. And then your fibula is thinner, and its main job really is to stabilize your ankle. Otherwise, it doesn't really do anything, I think. Don't count me on that. And then you have your tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges, which are like your carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Um, yeah, and it's just like the same thing corresponds. Your tarsals, or actually, can anyone say it in the chat publicly, privately, unmute? What would your tarsals and metatarsals, like what would your tarsals be? If your carpals are your wrist, what would your tarsals be? You guys can put that in the chat. And then your metacarpals kind of just like in the middle of your foot, and then your phalanges are like your toes. So put in the chat. Okay. I see ankle. So yeah, your tarsals are basically your ankle, but since you're also on your foot, it's also your heel. So, the calcaneus bone is your heel, and it's pretty important. Like if you guys do science Olympiad or anything like that, um, calcaneus is a like the foot bone that you guys. So on this side, actually, the not colored side, that bone right there is your calcaneus bone, your heel. So yeah. Okay, Ryan.
Okay, so for joints, starting off, it's I know you guys have probably heard the term joints before, as Arushi's just talking about it, but also it's a very common part of the body, and because there's so many joints that help you move around. So a joint is a point where two or more bones meet, and it's responsible for movement and keeping you stable. So anytime you move your wrist or move your knee or your legs, a joint is being used. So the types of joints, there are many different types. There is the ball and socket joint, which moves back, forward, sideways, anyway, like rotating, and um, there is hinge joints, which are mostly just bending and straightening for any part. So they can be like bending your elbow and straightening it. And then there is the pivotal joint, ellipsoidal joint, and I am pretty sure that is it. And so joints are made up of usually cartilage or synovial membrane. And this reduces friction in the joints, especially since you're moving around a lot and you don't want a lot of friction because it could damage the bone or the joints. And also it is made up of ligaments and tendons because that's what could connect bones and muscles so that your bones aren't just like falling out of your joints, so that it stays in there so there's less like damage. And it also helps like to control movement, so your arms aren't just going everywhere, so you can control it and keep it straight if you need to, or bend it however you'd like. And so the most common joint is in the body is our synovial joints, and it's common to the term synovial membranes. And so just a quick question. So you can type in the chat or unmute if you'd like. What is a type of joint that can freely move? So the type of joint that can freely move whatever way you want it to. And don't be afraid to guess. Even if it's wrong, we'll still go over it. So just don't be afraid to try your best. Does anybody know? Okay, so I see someone said synovial, and that is correct. So the synovial joints allow your bones to freely move, rotate, go back and forth, and that is, yes, that is correct. And I do believe that the synovial joint is in your shoulder, I'm pretty sure, because that in your shoulder and your arms, you do have like a lot of ways you can move it, like you can rotate or like move it up and down. So yes, that is correct. And so for hinge joints, oh wait, sorry, I went over that. So examples of joints are your shoulder, your hip, your knees, your wrists, ankles, your neck, because you can move your head around back and forth. And oh, okay, so there's a question. So what joint is shown in the diagram for C? If you guys want to answer that in the chat. Or unmute. Okay, so it is your thumb and carpals, as Arushi said, and for those joints, you can move around your fingers a lot, and you have that on all your fingers, and then yeah. So for your wrist, it is the ellipsoidal um the ellipsoidal joint, and you can move it all around whatever way you want, except for pivotal. So you have all movement except for pivotal movement. And in the neck, it is pivotal and a pivot joint, as you can see in letter A. And then for D in the shoulder, it is a ball and socket. And then I'm going to ask you one last question before we finish. So hopefully you guys will put that in the chat or unmute. It is, what are examples of gliding joints? So just to give you a little hint, it is from letter C that we answered earlier.
You guys, we need participation. So this class is for you. We don't know how much you know, so we're asking these questions to see like if we need to go more in depth in our slideshows, or if we should tone it down. Like, we need to know for you guys, like, this is for you, not us. So if you don't want to answer, or if you don't know the answer, like, you can just say like, I'm not sure, or you can like even private message me so nobody can see. But like, we just need to know that you're still listening, I guess. Okay, I guess we'll move on.
Just the answer to that question, it was carpals and tarsals are examples of gliding joints.
Okay, I got some answers in the chat. So it's a saddle joint. You just kind of have to memorize these kinds of things. Yeah. Okay, so do you guys have any questions about the Quizlets or any material? Because I know the Quizlet like went way more into depth about every tiny little bone. So do you guys want to go more in depth, or should we just play the Kahoot now? Answer in the chat, Kahoot or questions. Okay, so one person said more in depth, one said Kahoot. If you have a question, that you want to go more in depth about, could you ask? Because I'm not sure what, should be more in depth. And then we'll play the Kahoot as soon as I get that question. Hopefully soon, because we only have around 15 more minutes. Oh, okay. There are no questions. Okay, we'll play the Kahoot now then. And the Kahoot, I believe, I'm not sure if I remember every single question, but it goes over some things that we did not cover. So if you have questions about that, definitely ask after and mark them down. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we.
Wait, could you hear the music? Or like I turned it down because I can hear it, but can you guys hear it right now?
No, we can't.
Okay, I'm just gonna turn off. It's very annoying. Okay. We have 3 of you guys, so hopefully you all play. So log in. Grace, are you gonna join? Okay, we're gonna start. Average adult. And it doesn't really matter if you get them right or wrong. This is more for you. And if you have questions, obviously you can just ask. Okay, so bones are actually where your most of your blood cells are made because it's inside the bone marrow, and bone marrow is inside your bone. Okay, so like I mentioned, the cranium, that's where a bunch of your neurovasculature is going through, like a bunch of your nerves. Remember, that's why they have all the foramen. So the sense organs are actually your like your facial bone, like your facial features, as well as a bunch of stuff going on in your brain. Like each of the lobes has is responsible for senses. Um, so that's what your brain protects, or your skull protects the brain, which is a sense organ as well. You know how people say drinking milk makes your bones stronger? It's a hint. Because milk is rich in calcium, and calcium is what builds up your bones, if you can think of it that way. This is more of the structure of an individual bone. We didn't really go over this. Good job. Again, we didn't go over this. You have two types of bone, compact and spongy. So yeah, so spongy bone is a lot like less dense and hard, I guess. So they have different arrangement of cells, which is why they have different textures. I'm gonna start going a little faster, so if you guys have questions, we can get to them because we don't have much time. And then at the end, I also have a feedback form for you guys to fill out. So your coccyx and sacrum are part of your vertebral column. The sternum is in your thoracic area. So the ilium is that part of a pelvis. I went over this when we were talking about the torsals. Yeah, that's your heel. Again, like the material that we send out over the week on Google Classroom is the main material. Um, this is supposed to be a review, so I hope you guys aren't learning during this because this is just more like a question kind of thing. The slideshows over Google Classroom are the main source of information. Yeah, so it's not your pelvis because these ones are part of the vertebral column, which is your sacrum. Your carpals are your wrists, and metacarpals are like in between your phalanges and carpals. All right, so yeah, so good job to all of you guys. If you have any questions, you should write them down, and you can always like email me or Discord chat me anything. We don't have time. So you guys can always Discord, like private Discord or just in the class channel. You can always Discord me your questions, and I'll get back to you. Let me post the feedback form again. Ryan already did. Let me do it one more time. Uh-oh, okay. Oh, I have to like exit out of this. Okay, sorry, my computer's being a little weird. Okay, let me.
Does it work? Or
yeah, hopefully that link worked. I just sent it again. So on your own time, you guys can fill that out. Please fill that out because that's more like how the class is working for you guys, so we know what to change. Other than that, yeah, we're done for today. The next unit I'll be posting on Google Classroom today, and it'll be the integumentary system, which is much shorter. So thank you all for attending, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.